The Urban League of San Diego County is on the front line of education and youth development, empowering workforce, housing, and financial development. We provide community health and wellness opportunities and civil rights and civic engagement. Welcome to the Urban League Today with hosts Al Abdallah and Herman Collins.
Recently, Californians have become all too aware of the term atmospheric river, a relatively long, narrow stream of water forming as a storm, dumping inordinate quantities of rain over a period of time, often causing flooding, mudslides, and submerging areas that don't usually experience such. Many sectors of southeastern San Diego were adversely affected by January rains, now called the Great Storms of 2024, which saturated the county with massive storms in succession, crippling stormwater control efforts and devastating neighborhoods, chasing families from their homes and creating disaster recovery homeless population.
Personally, I witnessed the pain of seniors, families, and children unsure of what comes next. Where will I sleep? How can I eat? The Urban League would like to thank the countless volunteers, American Red Cross, city and county agencies, skilled trade men and women, and first responders who have responded to this disaster. The immediate question is, could this tragedy have been prevented? Who is responsible for stormwater? Will this happen again?
The questions you pose are challenges beyond the immediate recovery and getting people back in their homes. As a native San Diegan, I witnessed this flooding in 1992, again in 1996, serving with former City Council member George Stevens and as a consultant to the city's redevelopment agency. I am all too familiar with the Chollas Creek watershed and the needed infrastructure improvements required to protect people and businesses from flooding while promoting environmental protection and conservation of our native habitat. Al, at your direction, I invited several experts to discuss the Chollas Creek watershed and the City of San Diego's adopted master plan to mitigate the challenges of flooding in southeastern San Diego, Shelltown, Redwood, and South Crest. Urban League Today, our guests are Heidi von Wolf-Bloom, Planning Director of the City of San Diego, Leslie Reynolds, Executive Director of Groundworks, and Christina Willis, President and owner of Willis Environmental. Al, please welcome our guests.
Ladies, please let me express appreciation and thanks for joining us on the Urban League today. Can I impose on each of you to tell our listeners a little about yourselves, professional responsibilities, and your involvement, understanding of the Chollas Creek Watershed Master Plan? Starting with Heidi von Bloom, Leslie Reynolds, and Christina Willis. Leslie?
Heidi.
I'll start off. My name is Heidi von Blum. I'm the director of the City Planning Department with the City of San Diego. My department is responsible for the long-range growth of our city. We plan for new jobs, good homes, and the parks and recreational spaces needed to serve existing and future community members. I've been involved in the Chollas Creek watershed as my team was responsible for the adoption of the citywide Parks Master Plan in 2021. And one of the implementation actions identified for that was to prepare a master plan for the Chollas Creek Watershed Regional Park. And my team has been working since that time to work with community members to ultimately develop a draft plan that we can share with the community, receive additional feedback, and ultimately take to our city council for consideration.
Great.
Thank you, Heidi. Leslie?
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Leslie Reynolds, and I'm the Executive Director of Groundworks San Diego Chollas Creek. And we have been around since about 2007. We were formed at the request of the City of San Diego, actually, to serve as the watershed manager for the Chollas Creek watershed. and to actually see implementation of the Chollas Creek Enhancement Program, which was approved by the City Council back in 2002 and had been left pretty much unattended. And so it's been our honor and our pleasure to be leading that effort. We first thought about a regional park for Chollas Creek back in about 2015. And it was not until Mayor Gloria came on board with Heidi and her team that we finally achieved this incredible designation of a Chollas Creek Regional Park. So we're very excited to be working with the city and with our communities and all kinds of stakeholders to advance that effort.
Thank you. And Christina?
Hi, I'm Christina Willis, but everybody calls me Tina. Only pastors and bill collectors call me Christina.
Okay.
I am going to give you a little bit more background than our other guests today because my involvement with this area is not only as a professional working in the environmental and urban planning space, but this is my home. I am a fourth generation San Diegan. My great grandmother worked at the Douglas Hotel. My grandfather was class of 32, San Diego High, and my mother is class of 54. I grew up in Lincoln, playing in the storm drains of the Las Pulidas Creek catching tadpoles. And so that just gives you a little bit of background. My involvement with Chollas Creek Master Plan is that I am a resident and will be a recipient of the benefits of that program. Professionally, I've been got 35 years of environmental and urban planning experience in San Diego. I am the owner and founder of Willis Environmental Planning. From 1989 to 92, I was the environmental consultant for the Southeastern Economic Development Corporation. I joined them as the manager of their planning and development division from 92 to 96, and I was the project manager for the Imperial Marketplace project. That's where Home Depot is now. And I was also the project manager for the Potter project where Earl Gilliam Post Office is located. Our responsibilities included everything, all development, both above ground and public improvements in the entire area from 5 all the way east to Lemon Grove. And so my area of expertise and interest is really the watershed area south of 94. So that just gives you a little bit of background on my experience.
Thank you so much. This first question is for Leslie. Leslie, what is the Chollas Creek Master Plan? How was it adopted and who's responsible for its implementation?
Let's see. I would say well, as I said before, it came into being thanks to Mayor Gloria, who gave us that designation. And what it aims to do is bring green spaces and green streets and beautiful parks and a restored creek to the watershed and its residents. In terms of who has responsibility, shared responsibility really between the mayor and his staff, the city council, and all of the residents and resident stakeholder groups in the watershed. And so the planning is being implemented in exactly that fashion with a lot of community voices and a lot of in-depth planning around what the future of the regional park is going to look like.
Heidi, from the perspective of the city, what is occurring with the Chollas Creek Master Plan? What are the anticipated costs, funding, and timelines for its implementation?
As Leslie mentioned, we were very excited for the Chollas Creek watershed to be formally designated as a regional park after many years, decades of community advocacy. And our team has moved into the phase of preparing a master plan for the regional park. We really view this as an opportunity to build on the work that the community has delivered through the Chollas Creek Enhancement Program back in 2002, and using that information with close coordination with community members, stakeholders, as well as our tribal community leaders to identify how we can best plan for this watershed to be culturally relevant, provide connections between communities, provide opportunities for better water quality and safe trails and recreation opportunities throughout the watershed. Our team has been working in consultation with the community to be able to understand the needs, opportunities, constraints, so that we can together work on this master plan. We plan to be able to release a first draft of this plan later this fall, and ultimately bring it forward to our city council for consideration later this winter, probably into 2025. In terms of funding, most of the funding will come through implementation of this plan. The plan is really the first step to be able to identify a roadmap for projects to be implemented in the watershed. And with the adoption of this plan, the city can leverage federal, state, and other grant funding opportunities to finally implement the projects identified through this planning process.
Thank you. Next question is for Christina. As an environmental consultant and having worked with the city's redevelopment agency and migration of the flood plan, what should residents be concerned with regarding flood control, habitat, and environmental justice? I know that was a mouthful, so I can repeat if you'd like me to.
No, that's okay. And I will break those down and speak to each one of those individually. As an environmental consultant, I think that what's happened in our community in regards to mitigation in the floodplain has been amazing, because floodplain improvements are really under the jurisdiction of other agencies. The floodplains are under the Regional Water Quality Control Board or the Army Corps of Engineers with all of their permitting efforts, and all of those permitting efforts are going forward exactly as planned. But what the community needs to be concerned about, and residents need to be concerned about, is with implementation of some of these plans, such as the Chollas Creek Master Plan, which required for some developments along the creek to provide an easement such that there could be a trail along the backyards of some of the homes. The residents really need to be concerned about some unanticipated consequences. When we developed the Home Depot property, one of the things we had to do is we had to elevate the property out of the floodplain, and then we had to install trails on either side of the creek there. There was a concern in the community that Home Depot would have some unanticipated consequences, that it would cause people who were looking for work to gather in their parking lot. Home Depot assured us that that was not going to happen, that they would police their parking lot and ensure that these people who were looking for work would not gather in the parking lot. Home Depot did that. The unanticipated consequence was that they pushed them over onto the trails along the creek. And so now you have people who don't live in the community who are now have access to people's backyards that have made the residents very concerned. And you have some of these trails that are no longer usable by the residents because of some of these unanticipated consequences. In terms of the habitat, I think the habitat work that's been done has been amazing. The creek improvements have gone away from just the trapezoid concrete lined channels. They've installed the plantable blocks, which slow down the water and which also provide water quality improvements as the water travels down the creek. Those things have been amazing. But in terms of environmental justice, I wouldn't have the residents focus on environmental justice. I'd have them focus more on resource issues. Environmental justice is really under the National Environmental Policy Act. It just requires that there is a provision for the community to have input into the process. Under the California Environmental Quality Act, environmental justice is only required when there is a general plan amendment. And many agencies are struggling now on how to incorporate environmental justice into their environmental analyses. So as a resident, I would have them focus on what are the impacts to actual resources, to the floodplains, to the habitat, and then also bring up in your community meetings some of our experiences with the unanticipated consequences.
And Tina, that's an interesting perspective that you share on environmental justice. Uh, However, my personal view happens to be is that these are many passed over sites that we see that are available for development in southeastern San Diego. As such, they present different type of challenges. Uh, as you mentioned, mitigation was required to raise Home Depot out of the floodplain. Mitigation was required at Jacobs to make some sizable changes. We also saw that mitigation was required at the post office to get that out of the floodplain.
Yes.
But when we look at the site itself, while that may be mitigated, there aren't many other mitigation aspects that are occurring throughout the area. You and I are both familiar with Imperial Avenue from 61st all the way down to 69th. There are two storm drains on the whole 9 blocks.
Yes.
And so when you look at the flooding that we see in many cases, just from simple rain, it's simply because water cannot get to a flood control system to be able to leave out. I want to kind of place this question to everyone. Has the U.S. Geological Survey been conducted of that particular area? And if so, how does it play into the watershed management program?
If I might jump in, Herman? To the point that you're making, I really think that where we're headed is with an overall analysis of the watershed from what we call a blue-green perspective. And in fact, we're working with the mayor's office to kick off a year-long series of stakeholder meetings that would include the city, Caltrans, Sandag, school district, residents, and others, to think about how to look at the watershed as a whole, really as an ecosystem, not a storm drain system. And that means to say we want to look at hydrologic solutions that occur with other multiple benefits for our residents, meaning nature-based solutions that can capture water, improve water quality, and also deliver heat and air and green space benefits to our residents. So that is going to require an intensive GIS mapping exercise. And I believe we're about to receive external funding from the State Regional Board to accomplish that, and then work with the city and our resident stakeholders and others to begin to prioritize the kinds of blue-green infrastructure solutions that will, again, bring multiple benefits to our residents. So that's really, I'm hoping, going to be the goal so that we can maximize the beauty of this watershed and all that it can offer our communities.
Thank you very much.
Heidi or Tina, would you like to jump in there?
I'll just add on to what Leslie shared, that we have the benefit of having very engaged community members, and we've laid the framework through city policies that have been adopted in the last couple of years. I had mentioned our Parks Master Plan. We also had a climate resiliency plan adopted in 2021 as well, that is very much in line with identifying co-benefits that we can gain through investments in climate adaptation measures, whether that be with respect to flooding or extreme heat. All of these have the opportunities to enhance the lives of people that live in the communities, and that is uniquely true within the Choice Creek watershed.
Thank you.
My perspective on that, I'm sorry, one other thing to add on that. The master planning effort that is going forward, that is to be applauded, and that will address things moving forward. But what Herman and I are talking about are some of the historic flooding areas. So there are the Imperial Avenue area. It is mapped by FEMA. It's in the 100-year floodplain. And we at SEDC, we conducted surveys of the area dating back to the late 80s. And so the area along Imperial Avenue around 62nd to 69th Street, much of that is within the 100-year floodplain. Even now, with the storm drains as they are currently constructed, we found that during the recent storms, the trolley line was flooded out. Well, yes, because that is an existing 100-year floodplain area. And so moving forward, it is to be applauded the efforts that are being considered to benefit the community moving forward. But we still have historic areas that are being flooded and are impacting the residents of the area now. Many residents couldn't take the Orange Line because that was just closed down. Certain segments of the crossing of the trolley were shut down as a result of the flooding and the improvements that were being done um, during the repair process. I think we're talking about there are historic problems that need to be addressed, and we want to make sure that that's also taken into consideration as part of the master planning effort.
And what I'll add to that, Leslie, because I know that you've put a lot of work into this, but the visioning I think that many of us see with that particular community is that it is not dealt with in a holistic atmosphere. And I go back to this Imperial Avenue corridor. What we have is that we have in Imperial Avenue, we're trying to create businesses along the corridor. But to get to that, if you're a resident, you have to cross a trolley line and you have to deal with a flood control channel.
Yes.
And you can only cross it 3 points
Yes.
in a 9-block process. We know that there were just funds that were put together by parks to create park space and try to heal some of these communities where that have been divided as a result of development. If we don't deal with this aspect of this divided street, Imperial Avenue, trolley, and storm drain, we won't be able to create a community. You'll be able to create a walkway, but it won't be a community. And so when I say environmental justice issues, it's how we deal with things. Are we going to look at it in a holistic atmosphere? I also then will go back to Heidi and say from a planning aspect, if you look at the traffic grading of Imperial Avenue, it's a D or an F at best. And so we can change that if we look overall at how maybe we route that traffic around. Aikens is an underused street. What happens if we divert traffic one way on Aikens and another way on Imperial? What happens when we add more parking on Imperial to make those businesses be able to operate and have a clientele? So I understand the master plan of the creek, but the creek right now is an impediment in many cases to business, happiness, and being able to understand how that community functions. Well, let's go to the next question. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So if I may, I think you're speaking exactly to what is called reconnecting communities. And in fact, San Diego through SANDAG and Caltrans has just been awarded something in the order of $50 million. And so you're exactly right. The creek has served as an impediment, but it doesn't have to be that way in the future. It can be an amazing asset to the community. One of the projects we're working on right now and will ground break next month is on Federal Boulevard. And it's a dechannelization of the creek, those old solutions that actually undermined the viability of our beautiful waterway. Dechannelizing the creek, putting a trail along the creek, putting urban canopy there, capturing water for water quality benefits, but also working on a connection for the eastern communities along and inside the creek during dry weather, all the way to San Diego Bay. So you're quite right. Reconnecting communities has got to be a major priority.
Thank you. And this question is again, for all of you. The City of San Diego website identifies 4 maps of flood-prone areas within the city: Chollas, Mission Valley, Sorrento Valley, and Tijuana River Valley. Have we misunderstood San Diego's topography that Chollas is a valley with older substantial development and population? And anyone can answer.
Since everybody's quiet, I'll pray and anoint Heidi.
Sure. So I do want to point out, and going back to your last question about, the creek really being an impediment to access versus the creek, as Leslie mentioned, having so many opportunities to reconnect communities as well. Part of the master planning process is, just as you mentioned, really looking holistically at everything. A community isn't just its trails, it's not just its streets, it's not just its parks. It's really for people to interact, enjoy nature, enjoy their environment, be able to move about, gain access to schools, parks, jobs, etc. And that master planning process is that critical first step to take. As part of that, with respect to stormwater, I do not manage the city stormwater department. We have a separate stormwater department that is overseen by a different director who I closely coordinate with through the master planning process. So with respect to any implementation or day-to-day maintenance, those are questions better directed to our stormwater department partners. However, those are people and professionals that we work very closely with to integrate stormwater management and potential green infrastructure improvements through this master planning process.
And I guess what I'm trying to get at in this question is that as we look at the master plan and the creek itself, the city also has a housing program where we will probably add some 7 to 10,000 units within southeastern San Diego that are going to be multifamily and really cause additional strain on the existing infrastructure that we have there. In many cases, we have built out southeastern San Diego where people live in a floodplain, live in a canyon, and we will probably exacerbate that more and more. When we look at the flooding that just occurred at Euclid and Market, plan within that area is over 3,000 units. And we know those units that were at Jacobs flooded in the garage. What will happen when we add additional units to that without looking at the overall mitigation aspects of where people live? And so that's really what I'm getting at in this question is that, is Chollas Creek a valley? Have we built in a valley? And are we about to build more in a valley without looking at the circumstances of what people are going to be asked to endure?
I'm going to
Sure.
defer to my two colleagues who are both planners here, but I would like to say as an example, Herman, to your point about the Jacobs Center in Euclid, Director Andy Fields, Director of Parks and Rec, is coming out to meet with one of the developers in a couple of weeks to talk about green spaces in and around that development and the creek that can accommodate any overflow that may occur during heavy rain. So we believe that there are ways to accommodate both people and housing and green spaces if we use really state-of-the-art kinds of solutions that are being used elsewhere. But again, I need to defer to my planning colleagues here on this question.
So I can address some of that. The current development regulations, it used to be that if you built a shopping center, if you built a home, if you built a multifamily development, then all the runoff from that property, from that parcel, would just go to the curb or into a on-site drain, and it would all drain into the storm drains. And the capacity for the storm drains was calculated on that amount of runoff. Current regulations for the Regional Water Quality Control Board and all the MS permits that all of the local jurisdictions are under require that any development, any new development, all of the stormwater runoff has to be captured and treated on site. I say that to say that it is not a capacity issue in terms of the amount of water, stormwater being generated by the new development. It is a matter of keeping the storm drains that we have flowing. And some of the unanticipated consequences that have happened resulted due to policies completely unrelated to the master plan. I think the master planning effort is amazing, but you've had a number of service providers for the unhoused move from downtown San Diego, and they've been pushed east. And so that population has been pushed east. And that population has taken up residence along our storm drains because they are green, they are available, they are unpopulated, and as we know, they are unused right now. And as a result of those persons who are unhoused living there, there has not been a concomitant commitment by other city departments to maintain those waterways. They have not done the maintenance, they have not picked up the trash, they have not policed the area, and so you have an unanticipated consequence of people living along the creeks that are clogging up the creeks with their debris. And that's not something that can be addressed in this master plan per se, but we would hope that it would be part of the coordinated effort and the other discussions that Heidi was mentioning having with the other departments within the city.
Thank you. Heidi, did you have any closing comments there?
Yeah, kind of going, back to, I think where you're originally going with that. Leslie touched on it, but there are definitely opportunities to be able to have, what she had referred to as nature-based solutions, where we really do have opportunities to use enhancements to the creek as well as the watershed to reduce flooding potential. But overall, with respect to new development, I kind of want to point out that we do also have other regulations in place. Projects that do come in that are in environmentally sensitive lands do go through a separate development permitting requirement and are subject to additional regulations. And as part of this master planning process, this does give us an additional opportunity to identify the additional improvements in terms of stormwater and flood control prevention, especially through nature-based solutions, to identify those for the community through this watershed master plan.
And I truly understand that. But Heidi, what I live every day is the fact that we have had more than 1,200 families displaced as a result of flooding. We know that flooding is a once in a lifetime event, but it could happen again and be twice in a lifetime. I also know that immediately after that flooding and those families were displaced, several for-profit and nonprofit developers began to meet with residents about buying their properties with the ideal of taking advantage of the city's new housing regulations and taking what would have been a single family resident and turning it into multifamily. If we don't dovetail those programs together, while we may have a good watershed master plan, we're going to have a community that is going to suffer greatly as a result of this disaster that just occurred and will change immediately. And I think that is the underpinning of what I hear as I walk and talk to other residents. They may not talk about that when you have a meeting on the master plan, but if you ask them the question of what is going to happen and where they're going to live tomorrow, they're afraid that they're going to be priced out of that. But that's another discussion and another meeting. Right. And so, but I would be remiss not to mention that. and not get that across.
Perhaps we can come back and do another podcast on housing.
There you go.
Absolutely. Next question. This is for any of you who'd like to answer. Has a price tag to correct all these concerns been calculated? And if so, where would the funding come from?
I can jump in there, and Leslie, I think you can follow up there. But no, a price tag has not been identified because we are in the process of moving forward with the master plan. Remember that the master plan, at a very high level, identifies improvements to the watershed. And from there, that gives us the ability to identify what we would be pricing out. In terms of implementation and obtaining the funding, once we have a plan in place, it's much easier to be competitive for grant funding opportunities because a granting agency is going to see that our jurisdiction, our elected officials have bought into the plan. And that we're ready, kind of shovel ready to move forward with implementation. So there's a variety of grants that can be sought after, whether they are, traditional infrastructure grants, advancing environmental justice related grants, and also, as Leslie mentioned, with respect to climate resiliency, work within this watershed and particularly within these communities can be very competitive for additional grant funding for implementation. But I'll defer to Leslie for any additional thoughts there.
Well, we're just very, very lucky to be in partnership with the city as we bring external funds to the watershed and to these projects. And so, for example, the Federal Boulevard project, the Dechannelization Trail and Urban Canopy and Pocket Park project has received something in the order of $10 million of external funding that we brought, Bezos funding, State of California funding. And we also have a project before the federal government Department of Transportation for another $10 million for one of these reconnecting community projects. So we are very excited, along with other NGOs in the watershed, to be working closely with the city on improving city assets and taking advantage of really quite significant external funding that's out there.
Heidi, are we looking at any joint agency funding processes? I know that in Mission Valley, the First River project was put together, and a joint powers agency was established to create a funding mechanism, since the river affected not only the city and the county, but also some of the cities upstream. Somewhat like we see with Chollas, is that Chollas is impacted by the bay, it's impacted by the city, it's impacted by the Navy, it's impacted by the city of San Diego as it jettisons some of its surplus property around Federal. And then upstream in Lemon Grove and La Mesa, we were able to see if water can't get to the bay quickly enough, the drain will back up quite a ways inland. Are we looking at any joint power agreements that we can get something a little bit more than just grants?
Yeah, so those are all, items to be explored for implementation. At this stage, we're working on drafting the master plan to begin with. And then in terms of the future, certainly a joint powers authority is a potential. As you mentioned, you kind of hit on all of the applicable interjurisdictional players through that process. So anything's possible in the future. At this point, me and my team are focused on bringing forth the master plan.
Okay, I just, and this is one of those EJ issues, environmental justice, is that joint powers funding was primary consideration in the Midway project. I mean, it went hand in hand with the planning aspect. We didn't wait to develop a master plan and then try to figure out how we're going to fund it. We knew that we were going to fund the Midway project through some type of joint powers. It is an environmental justice issue when we don't treat everything alike.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you referring to the Midway Rising project in the Midway Pacific Highway? So that project is resulting in, there's kind of a lot of different issues because it does involve the development by a private developer through an RFP process with the city to develop a lot of the proposal there. With respect to this master plan, this affects a lot of different property ownerships along the entirety of the watershed. And that's really where this important master planning does come into place. For the Midway, that was contemplated through the Midway Pacific Highway Community Plan Update, which was adopted in 2016. And so we see that project as an implementation of a prior master planning process.
Okay.
But I would want to say, Herman, that idea of a joint power authority goes all the way back to Greg Cox, who was one of our inspirations for master planning the watershed. And so it's certainly front and center, and a lot of us think a critical issue and opportunity.
I just happened to look and say, we're not going to see a large major developer come in as we do out in Midway Rising. We're not going to see a major developer as we did along the Mission Valley process with the First River project, as we had all the available land that we were trying to create. However, if we don't look at something beyond trying to burden the residents with those things that are going to be needed to restore this community, it becomes an impossible task. And so I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg, but maybe I want to be in the state of Alabama and know that chickens are eggs and everything happens all at one time. Let's go to this real last question.
Yes.
Resident complaints from the recent flooding centered around the city's lack of maintenance of the storm drains. And I know no one is here from the storm drain department. But really, is it that simple that if we clear these channels of brush and debris, that's going to prevent flooding?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's an awful lot that needs to happen. It's what we've been speaking about, all three of us, which is multiple benefit, multiple solutions, gray, green, gray. The creek will have to be recontoured. There will have to be some gray infrastructure that will support some of that recontouring. So it's a very complicated, multifaceted problem. And simply maintaining the creek was actually never the cause of all of this, nor will it be the solution. I mean, part of the cause was said earlier, was that this creek was channelized with an ill-designed engineering solution back in the 60s. That never should have happened, and we're suffering the consequences. So it is a complicated and challenging problem, but I think all hands are on deck now, including a lot of resident voices, and I think we're going to get there.
Tina?
So I think the increased maintenance is a short-term solution. It is not the ultimate and long-term solution. But increased maintenance does need to continue to happen while the plan is being prepared, and so that the vision for the plan can ultimately be manifested, and so that you also have community support for a watershed master plan. It's really hard to have a vision for a master plan when you're standing in water.
Absolutely.
And I agree. I asked the question a little bit earlier. Had we asked U.S. Geological Survey to come in and to be conducted, the reason why I asked that question was because I believe the watershed has changed and groundwaters have changed significantly. Mm-hmm. And evidence of that right now is at Lincoln High School, where we have a football field that is on artificial turf. That when we started to go through regular maintenance of that, we found that water now is seeping from under the ground, and it is going to take a couple $1 million to correct that. My childhood takes me back to the days when there actually was
Grass.
a creek that went from the potato chip factory
Yes.
that all of us know at the Dip,
Yes.
which is right there at 47th in Logan, that connected all the way back to the industrial park that is now Jacobs.
Yes.
While we may have covered over some things, those things now are seeping back up. And I really encourage Leslie, from an advocacy standpoint, that there needs to be a new geological survey of the area, because we have always thought of it as being Chollas and not being Chollas Valley. It is a valley, and we have built in a valley, and people are going to be flooded again simply because we have had some problems in the past, and we really don't understand, I believe, the total watershed or the valley itself. As we move forward, because I want to be able to close with you, this is the last round, and we're not going to ask you a question, but if there's anything you'd like to add, please go ahead and throw it in.
I'll just add in, with respect to the master planning process, I sense a little bit of, concern, and which I appreciate, that the master plan would have unintended consequences. And so that is why I definitely encourage anybody listening to participate in our planning process, because we want to have a master plan in place that improves everybody's lives. We absolutely are not interested in bringing forward any plans that will harm or hurt anybody's lives. So we want to have full participation. We're happy to hear from anybody, so that can inform our process moving forward, again, so that we can have a plan in place that really does improve the lives of community members.
Question, follow-up question. What's the best way for residents to really get involved with that?
We have a website where you can reach out to my staff, provide comments. You can sign up to stay updated on the process. So when we do have events or community meetings, you will be notified by email through that process. But also my staff is available to answer any questions or receive any feedback through our webpage. It can be accessed through our webpage at www.sandiego.gov/planning. You can click what we're working on, and then you'll see a link to the Chollas Creek Regional Park Master Plan.
Great.
And if I might add to that also, we'd love anyone to reach out to Groundwork. We have hundreds of engaged residents who are part of advocacy and what we call climate safe neighborhoods. So we really count on these resident voices to advocate for the investments and the kinds of strategies for the watershed that they deserve. So please reach out. We'll put you to work.
Great. Tina, you're going to get the last word.
I'm pleased that Ms. Von Bloom and Ms. Reynolds have taken the time to participate in a podcast like this. This is an opportunity to hear from a different segment of the community. I drive Imperial Avenue every day. I live here. And so you're getting a different perspective that may not attend the community planning meetings. I'm a business owner. I'm a mother of a special needs child. It's very difficult for me to get to meetings. So I really do appreciate your time today. And I am encouraged that the information that you're hearing is going to be taken into consideration as you move forward with the planning process. Being a long-term resident of southeastern San Diego, there is some planning fatigue that can set in. We've participated in a number of plans where our voices were heard. They were listened to, but our input didn't get incorporated into the plans. And so I'm excited that these committed individuals have participated and come here today to really hear what is said, and that this will be incorporated into their planning effort. Thank you both. I really appreciate your time.
You're absolutely welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank you for your participation today.